Good evening. Here we are at week 6 of Mindful Aging. We'll begin with a sitting meditation, please. Here is our base practice. And it's from this place that we can explore all those other places. So just sitting, finding a comfortable position where we can be alert and relaxed at the same time. We can close our eyes or gently gaze down forward. Just feel what it's like to sit. Notice sensations in the body. The feet on the floor. The butt in the chair. The thighs. The back. The hands resting. Just sitting and noticing. Focusing our attention on the sensation of breathing brings us home, back here, this place. Feeling the in-breath and the out-breath. And the pauses in between. Right now, just letting the body breathe, noticing if it changes. Perhaps one breath is deeper. Another one less deep. Maybe our rate of breathing changes. We just notice it. And at some point, other things come up in our mind. Thoughts come by. Sensations, feelings. We notice that. But make an attempt not to cling to that thought. Just let it go by as it goes. Back to the feeling of the breath. Not clinging to that either, just using it as a home base. Just sitting and breathing. And paying attention, being alert for what comes by in the mind. Maybe naming it. Oh, thinking. Planning. remembering. Sometimes noticing what's going on around us. Many people feel that sitting in a group adds a certain strength to their meditation. All these minds here in a group, focusing, resting. How do you feel right now?
Relaxed.
So, week 6 tonight. As you recall, last week we talked about death, which is maybe something we don't talk about that often, but hope we found it enlightening in a way to think about that death. We did a grief practice where we notice how we feel when we have lost someone, and noticing it in our body and just going with that feeling, letting it come and then letting it go. And we talked about exploring our own dying day. Some of you laid on the floor and we went through a guided meditation about noticing your body sort of dissolving and fading. And the reading, the handout had some things in there that I hope were helpful. I thought particularly helpful, some of the reasons why it's worthwhile to think about our death. One of the things I like best is it makes us notice how valuable this day is right now. What a precious gift this life is. And I ask you to think about your death and to write down some ideas for a memorial service, a funeral, if you have ideas about that, and some ideas about an obituary, what you would want people to remember about you. And it sounds like many of you did think about that, and I'd be interested to hear if you would like to read what you wrote, that's okay, or if you just want to share things that jump out from you or that surprise you, we have plenty of time to talk about it. I did it too, and I know the first part of the week, I was obsessing about what I was gonna write about myself all the time, until I finally wrote it down. And it brings up feelings, feels kind of selfish, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Um,
I hope your obituary didn't go on and on about all your relatives.
That is a good question. Could you, David?
No, I didn't do an obituary, I wrote a little poem,
Okay,
if I could share it.
yes, please.
So, we were at our, health insurance, representative, and she had a quote on the wall by Quincy Jones, who just died. And, it goes, "When you're over the hill, that's when you pick up speed." And so it seemed kind of appropriate, but anyway, I took that and I said, headlong down the hill, valleys and highs of seasons past, winter of my life.
Was that a haiku?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Thank you.
Sure.
Picking up speed down the hill.
Reminds me of Doran Road, those drones. You do that, I take that road to Kettle.
Uh-huh.
There are better roads, you know.
Well, that's the most direct.
I guess I saw it as a way, I have a lot of brothers and sisters, but putting relatives and stuff in, they really impact your life, and it's a way to acknowledge them and show that you appreciated them. If you use the right words.
Did you get to write some of that?
Well, I just wrote, like when it came to my siblings, I just wrote, in addition, she is survived by her siblings who guided her through the years.
Nice.
And they all have. I mean, you ask them, they think they did more than that they actually did. And sometimes the advice wasn't appreciated, at the time.
He made a comment about mentioning all the next of kin. That's important sometimes to the next of kin to be mentioned in that obituary. Because when you're not, you don't get recognized for losing someone sometimes because people don't know. They didn't, after the fact, well, I didn't know that was your brother or sister.
Sure.
And if I would have known that, So it's a twofold thing. I mean, you can, sometimes it has to be there for the next of kin.
They want to hear their names.
Well, but you had the loss too.
Yeah.
I wrote down, I want my grandchildren's names mentioned.
Uh-huh.
Very often they just put, and it's survived by 8 grandchildren,
Right.
so.
Oh, yes, yep.
My girlfriend Barb's husband Leon wrote his own obituary, and he didn't include anything about Barb's family, and he was like their grandpa for 30 years. And that hurt.
Oh,
Yep.
wow.
I didn't do anything about an obituary. I looked in the paper for inspiration at the obits. Usually I don't read them, I just look for familiar names or look for the ages to see if they're younger or older than I. But I was a little inspired by them, and I kept thinking, I hope my story is not over yet. I'd like to wait a while yet, hopefully there's gonna be a lot more to add at the end. So I didn't.
And I was thinking about the obituary and kind of writing some things down. It reminded me of also all that I accomplished and was able to do. Cause you kind of, sometimes you get down on yourself and you kind of forget all the things that you've accomplished, and it was a good reminder of all that and different things I did that people didn't think I'd be able to, so.
Good. I think it's really good periodically to kind of look back on your life, see where you've been, the ups and the downs. Go through old photo albums. But they don't really capture it, do they? Everyone's smiling all the time.
I like the photos at the funeral. My daughters and I and a close friend went through, boxes and boxes of photos, and that was a really nice review of our life, and choosing them was sometimes difficult, but then those were submitted to the Weeding people, and they put it into a slideshow, and that was very, very nice. And then that remains, we were given that on a thumb drive, and so now we don't have to go through the box anymore. I guess I don't really want things that are just sort of ordinary things like hunting and fishing and being a Packer fan and stuff like that. I'd rather have a listing of my more significant accomplishments that took larger portions of my life. My life is kind of segmented into various periods where I was doing something rather special during that period, and then I transitioned to something else, and I'd like there to be kind of a chronology of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, and that we've kind of done that in this class, looking back on our life at certain periods in our life. Growing up, getting to be an adult, parent, perhaps getting older, looking at those stages is valuable. Let's see what I have here. I know that I request a funeral allowing my families and friends to grieve and remember. And the church I am a member of at the church I'm a member of at the time. Please ask everyone to sing Earth and All Stars. All 6 verses. In the key of Dave and the tempo of Doug. That's from my church. So most hymns are written too high, so down a half a note, and so many keyboard people play so slow. I wanted to have a little bigger there. Play a recording of Imagine by John Lennon, perhaps during the recession. So this is something else I've been going through lately. I don't know if I told you this. Thinking about burial versus cremation is a thought that's good to have people know, I think. Interrupt me if I already told you this story. I don't think so. So my wife Nora died 7 years ago, and she was cremated. And her ashes were put in an urn, and we didn't know what to do with them. And I told my 3 daughters, I think the best place for them is this lake in Michigan where she spent most of her summers and where we lived together for 5 years. And they said, okay, but of course, we never go to Michigan, so we could never all get together to go there. So last summer I went and spread a few of them, but just a few. And so a couple weeks ago, I had sort of a nightmare. Did I tell you this?
No.
Okay. I was in this old house in the basement. I was kind of familiar with it, but I know specific house. And I was looking for Nora's body. And I went through a room with a bunch of sewing machines and up this kind of timber staircase. And I got up to the top and I said to myself, I'm never coming here again. And I woke up. And I immediately thought, this was around November 1st. That time right around Halloween when many people say the veil is thin. And I thought, maybe Nora's saying it's time to take care of her ashes. And so I sent this to my girls, and one of them said, yeah, I was thinking that myself. And yes, let's do that. So we made a time to go to Michigan next July to do that. And oh, it feels so good to come to a completion here. I think, in a way, we were holding on to her this whole time, and it's time to let go. So I was thinking, what do I want done with my ashes? So I've said, so I had this connection with Wisconsin and Michigan. So I think I'd like my ashes on an appropriate time when there's a brisk wind from the west to go to the shore, Wisconsin shore of Lake Michigan, and throw them up in the air.
That's what I think too. I've always thought I'd like to have my ashes spread at Terry Andrews State Park.
Uh-huh.
But are there legal?
Yes,
I don't. You can't just spread your ashes anywhere, can you?
No.
Unless they don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Who's to know?
There aren't a lot of restrictions on it.
No.
We consulted with an attorney and she said that,
Everybody took.
there may be restrictions on private property owner or that sort of thing. You may not want to do that because properties change ownership or, they might build a condo or whatever.
Right.
But we found a place that was in nature that we both very much liked, and we went to that place very often with the kids and that sort of thing. And so after the funeral, we went there and we scattered the ashes in one of her favorite places, and that's where mine will be scattered. Everybody knows where it is in the family, and it's been a secret otherwise. And but we're very happy with that place, and I will be very happy to be scattered there.
Mm-hmm.
And we had all the grandchildren, all of the children, and a few close friends. It was nice.
One thing too, I learned, our brother passed away and he had a green burial. It's legal in Wisconsin to have a green burial. You can make a little box and you can bury. You don't need to go through the embalmment and all of that. You can have a green burial. And I thought that was interesting too. I thought that was a thing out of the past, but
What does that mean exactly?
he was buried like the next day. He didn't have any embalming done or anything. He made his own coffin.
But they buried his body.
They buried his body in a box.
But are there requirements to, you can't just bury them out here in the,
I don't think you can, they had a
It was in the
cemetery.
cemetery.
They had a
oh, it has to be
cemetery. They had
it
a
isn't
plot.
still in a cemetery.
And that's something to consider too. For me, I think being cremated is okay, but depending upon when I die, if I die tomorrow, my family's gonna need closure and maybe a place to go visit.
Yeah.
Where 20 years from now, you can scatter my ashes because I probably outlived some of my family. You know, so all these things have to be considered too. You know, at what point are you needed yet? I shouldn't say needed, but that's,
Uh-huh.
so the family can be in touch until they're ready to let go.
See, that's what I struggle with, the cremation versus the traditional burial, because I like going to the cemetery to see where my family was buried, and if you scatter the ashes, I suppose you have a location, but there's just something about seeing the names and.
Yep. You left your mark, you know.
But you
That's
can
exactly
be,
what my husband
you
said.
can be cremated and
Buried.
still be buried, right?
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
you bury the urn.
So I have two friends that lost their husbands, and one of them, when he passed, was cremated, and it was a couple's urn. And now when she passed, and he was buried at the church cemetery, and when she passes, she's gonna be cremated, his urn is being dug up, and they're putting her ashes in with his, and then it's being reburied. And then I have a different friend who lost her husband a couple years ago. And she has a couple's urn also. And his ashes are on her fireplace until she passes. And she said that she really likes that because every morning she says good morning, and every night she says good night. And tells him that she loves him, and for her that's very soothing.
We did the mausoleum in Fond du Lac. We were looking at what to do with our burial and stuff, and so we were there just to see what it was like, what it would cost, blah, blah, blah. And I found out, you know, that you can have your ashes buried in a coffee can as long as the bag is sealed, or a teapot, or whatever. You don't have to have this expensive urn as long as it's sealed. And I thought that was really interesting. So if somebody's a teapot collector or
Sewing machine.
sewing machine.
Here's another interesting fact. When my father-in-law died 8 years ago, South Dakota, we were asked to pick up his ashes because it was on our way to the funeral site. And the funeral director said, it doesn't matter how heavy a person is or how small a person is. Every single body he cremates, the ashes weigh 7 pounds. I thought that was an interesting fact. And we got the box and it was still warm. I mean, so it was like, that was interesting.
My youngest daughter does woodworking, and she made an urn, a beautiful urn, very decorative for Celeste. And but Celeste really wanted to be scattered in a particular place that she chose, and so I'll end up in that urn someday, I suppose, at least temporarily, until they scatter me.
With all the different options with, funerals, it seems to me it's important to make your wishes known, not that there's, decisions having to be made by your survivors later and, conflicts arising over that.
Conflicts, yes, especially if there's a lot of people involved, huh? And it makes probably easier for them if you've made some of these decisions, because it's hard enough to lose someone than to have to go through all that arranging things. Not only that, there's the insurance, there's the will.
But it's useful for everybody to discuss this ahead of time and be on the same page. And so my whole family knew in advance, including Celeste, what was gonna happen with her. And then at the same time, my decisions were made, and they know that. So there's not conflict there. The grandchildren were in on it, the children were in on it, and it's written down, and that's what it'll be.
one thing that surprised me, my sister, her daughters had picked out a beautiful dress for her, and she says to me, planning a funeral is like planning a wedding, only you don't send out invitations. And I thought about that for a long time.
I mean, you just, grieve till till it's all over, then the house gets quiet.
Right. Quiet.
We've certainly realized that everybody is different. And we were talking about this a little bit before class, that, we've been talking about, like, we'll have time to prepare for this, but every death is so different. You can die suddenly right now. And, not the way you had hoped, perhaps.
But in good company.
But I still think this idea of preparing yourself for how you're gonna face your own death. There's, I think, was this in the readings, or did I talk about this? Mahatma Gandhi was very devout man his whole life, and he was assassinated, he was shot point blank, and he had time to call on the name of God immediately after he was shot, and it seemed like he accepted it, And, so even if you die a violent death or a sudden death, or a painful death, that one book by Pema Chodron, the title is so good, How We Live is How We Die. So if you live your life angry and upset and disturbed and anxious, you're probably going to die that way too. So if there's something you can do during your life while you are alive to bring yourself to a place of insight and peace, that will benefit you, I think.
So I guess I didn't think of doing all this for myself. I thought more of doing it for my survivors.
Mm-hmm.
So would you write your own obituary,
I
or you leave
think
your kids to it?
I would write my own. I don't know. They can edit it.
They have to.
They won't have journalism degrees, so what do I know?
When my mom died, we were on the West Coast, and apparently my sisters were busy with things, so my brother said, no worries. I took clothes for Mom for the we all had this little bit of concern, what would a young man think was good? He did a fine job, but I must admit we had just a little trepidation.
Well, I hope my husband doesn't dress me. Camouflage on, probably.
I thought it'd be easier to slip into that jacket.
And pajama bottoms.
As Jim mentioned, a funeral director is a great value. They are so, it costs thousands and thousands of dollars, but it's so helpful, right?
Yeah.
Have you experienced that? Yeah.
I've
Getting you through
often
the whole
thought,
thing?
I've often thought, like people say you're called to a profession, nuns, priests, any profession you can be called. I've often thought that funeral directors are called to that position.
Yeah.
I used to work in a nursing home, so I would see them all hours of the day and night coming to pick up the deceased, and they're always dressed in suits, most of them. They're very respectful, and they're dealing with people at your most vulnerable times and your most trying times and, you know, I just think that's a true calling.
A lot of times it's a family business, and so probably some kid grew up in the funeral home, and so he's, you know, ideally suited to do that.
We lived in the old funeral home, the old Weeding Funeral Home on Madison Avenue, and so we knew Grandpa Weeding, and we knew Bud, and then they moved to the new place. But then I was doing a lot of work at Ledgeview at that time, and Dan Weeding was an Eagle Scout, and he had a number of projects and other things he did there. And so I got to know him pretty good as a teenager. And then he did a marvelous job for Celeste.
Okay.
And the whole family, really. I mean, we had a variety of meetings with him before she passed, and the kids were involved in most cases. And it was made easier. He was very compassionate, but he also knew us, and that was helpful too.
Any other thoughts on grief, dying? Well, we'll go on to, I was gonna take a break now, but I think we can keep going, unless you need a break. So, thought I'd close with a couple things. One is to kind of review what we've been working on over the past 6 weeks. Hand these out, please. Take one. And I'll kind of briefly summarize the topics that and what we did, as I recall, and you can fill in the blanks. And I've left some spaces there because after I'm done talking, or at some point, I'd like you to write down your thoughts.
Did you need that back? I'm not sure.
Thank you. Did everyone get one?
Yes.
Thank you, perfect. So every week we've begun with silent sitting meditation, and so that is the basic thing I think that I hope that you've taken from this, and I'd like to hear about how this may influence you as you go forward. I'd love to talk about, say again the definition of mindfulness, which is paying attention in the moment to what's happening in our mind, in our body, and in our environment with an attitude of curiosity and kindness. So just noticing what's going on is so powerful in itself. It seems so simple, but it really, if you don't do anything else and you just keep coming back to being aware of what's happening, I think that's, for me, a wonderful help.
Would that be the same as living in the now? What they
Yes.
call living in the now?
Yes?
Okay. It's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's a moment by moment
Yeah? Yeah,
thing.
that's right. So I guess there's some people who can do it continuously, but for most of us, we have to keep trying to come back to it.
Okay.
We were just talking about that. I read somewhere or whatever, but the concept of the past, the present, and the future is that the past is just that. It can't be changed, it can't be affected. It is what it has been and always will be. And living in the present is the only thing that happens right now, and then that becomes the past immediately. And the future is completely unknown. And so it's sort of like the only place that you really can exist is the present time.
Somehow we don't get that most of the time. And we talked about aging, and part of our process in this is to kind of reflect on who I am, what I've been through in my life. We've been doing that. What are the roles I've had? So we talked about the second half of life, where we kind of come to a place where we've gone through that important part of maturation, of growing up, of establishing a career and a household and an image of ourselves in the community, let's say. And then in the second half of life, we have a chance to go beyond that. But it's so comfortable just to stay in where we've been. And so often, it takes a lightning strike for us to, what? My life is so different now. All of a sudden, it's painful very often, you know. Somebody dies, or you lose your job, and all of a sudden, what? It's so hard. But as you get through that, you can look back and say, well, that changed my life for the better, because now I have a whole different perspective. We talked about becoming mentors, and that was the first thought that came to me when I started to think about this class, is that's one of the wishes I have as I get old, is to have something worthwhile in terms of thought or behavior to pass on to my kids. And so how do we do that? And so this idea of the Bodhisattva path, which means developing wisdom on purpose for the benefit of other people. That's how I define it. And so we do that over our life experience, and a lot of it comes to us, but we can be intentional about this too. You know, we can make a plan and say, I'm going to try to grow in my relationships and in my view of life and in my behavior, and not just act out of habit and do the things that always come easy, but to try to be thoughtful about it. So we talked about how relationships are such a big part of this path. Having a good friend that you can share with. And we talked about practices to support friendships. How do we show someone that we care about them? We listen, primarily, right? And so we did some things about mindful listening. We noticed certain thought patterns that go through our heads when we're listening to someone, and reminding ourselves to keep coming back to hearing what they're saying instead of what we're thinking. And we did a little thing about what's it called? Where you're mimicking or you repeat what somebody said. Mirroring. And I had an example of this past week that's so important. This is just everyday life, but I was going to go to the grocery store, and I was making a little list, and Barb said, okay, this and this, and I came home, and she said, oh, you didn't bring the bread. I said, well, I didn't hear you say bread, and I realized that I should have, if I would just say, oh, here's my list, is this what you said to me? How worthwhile that would be. So a little mirroring there. And we talked about part of this path is not just fostering relationships and learning about ourselves, but it's about being active, and it's about learning to care for other people. And we did a compassion practice where we intentionally thought of other people. A prayer practice is so helpful, where we set a time to picture someone perhaps and wish them good thoughts. In fact, we did a compassion practice where we tried to feel what they were feeling. And we talked about service, about how getting out in the community and finding what can we do, stepping out of our comfort zone a little bit to see what might benefit other people. Then we talked about sources of inspiration, how lots of times on this path that we lose energy. We say, why bother, and we just, maybe something happened to us, or maybe we're ill, but it just happens so often that we just kind of don't have the drive to keep doing it. And if we can bring ourselves to these sources of inspiration, that very often helps give us that inner fire again. So we talked about the arts, music, painting, perhaps, and whatever you have, and also gardening and hiking and just being out in nature. So we did that one activity about music where we listened to Beethoven and we did some drawing, and we went out, did a walk outside. It's beautiful outside at night, and just noticing what was going on and how that affected us. And then last week, as we talked about the end of life. So if you would, on your paper, write down some things that came up for you, surprises, something that you might want to carry with you in coming weeks. What was worthwhile of these past 6 weeks for you? As I mentioned, I hope to do this same class again in the spring, so if you have suggestions or ideas about the class for the future, that would be helpful.
Michael, in the book, they go through a day-long retreat, like on your own.
Yes.
Is that something that you could do with a group, or is it something you just have to do on your own?
Both, yes. So, of course, doing it as a group takes some organization. So I've shared with you, there's this opportunity this Saturday for a 4-hour silent meditation retreat in Sheboygan, and I have that information again, which we did a couple of times the past couple of years in the spring, and maybe we'll do that again. I'll give you all that information, where we met from 10 to 2 in silence, and we had, you brought a sack lunch and you ate your lunch silently. There was some guided meditation, walking meditation, a talk, and some discussion, but basically it's 4 hours of meditation. So that's helpful. It is really valuable to go on an extended retreat that's guided. A weekend, for instance. And if you're interested, I can give you some ideas, but there's, just look it up, and there's, depending on your religious affiliation, very often there's churches have retreats. And they're all different kinds, but they're a time to be set aside from your ordinary life. But a lot of teachers say, if you can set aside a day, 6 hours or whatever, by yourself, with no plans other than to make a simple meal and to meditate and to walk and write, perhaps a little reading, but not too much, it's basically a time of silence to be by yourself. Is valuable. It's something we're not used to.
I can't even imagine.
So I've been on 2 week-long retreats, and it is challenging. But the 3rd or 4th day, I was going crazy. And then by the end, I settled down and I was ready to go home, but for one thing, very often I find I try too hard to concentrate, to be in a certain state. And if you do this, just letting it go and not being too hard on yourself, I think is helpful for me.
One thing that struck me throughout this class, and particularly with the readings and my thinking that was really generated and encouraged by the class, was the fact that in our sitting practice, thoughts come and we just notice them and then they go away. And I was thinking of, the great authors that you suggested, and obviously they did some thinking. And, where does thinking come in, and where is that dividing line? In a way, some of the admonitions about thinking are a paradox with what I find very natural, and that is to think.
Yeah.
So I'm grappling.
Yeah.
I think Tokmei Zhangpa was really an inspiration, and I will go back again and again to him.
I feel like if anything, maybe the most important thing I've learned it in the past, but reminded, I have to get up every day and live life with intention. If I want to be a mentor or help people or whatever the title might be, I have to do it with intention. It's just not gonna happen because today, I just really blew off today. I was upset about the weather. My dogs didn't wanna go out walking. And I didn't get anything done, and I really am not proud of that. I didn't have any intentions, and I didn't accomplish a lot, so.
But
And I get up every morning.
What's wrong with that?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just trained to accomplish. That's the way I am.
Why do we feel we have to accomplish something? You were in the moment.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe you would have felt better if you had set an intention to accept what was ever happening.
I do many days get up and say, okay, God, who do you want me to help today? What do you want me, how do you want me to help him? And invariably something comes up and I can go help somebody and make a difference. Even if it's making food, a meal for somebody who's too busy to get it done.
I think that is a hard thing with retirement and aging, like, I feel kind of like you. Like, you have to start thinking, we're so used to accomplishing things and doing things and being productive, and we don't have to do that anymore.
Where did I read? We're not human, we're human beings, not
human
doings, or
doings.
something like that.
Sounds good though.
Yeah, something like that.
That's right.
I know Deb has a plaque in the kitchen on the wall that she got from one of our daughters. If I'm saying this right, it says something to the effect of, let whatever you do today be enough.
I think the most I got out of this class was the question, who am I? You know, beyond being a wife, mother, grandmother, and all that. I started searching to see what I want to do, or there's more to me than what's on the exterior. And I have to figure out what that is, because you're so busy doing all those other things. And maybe that's where meditation comes in.
For me, the who am I question, when you first asked it, I always felt like I had to be more. I had to think of more than what I was, but now, when you first handed out the handout, who am I, I'm more relaxed about it, and accepting of who I am in a better place.
When I was younger, someone would ask you, what do you do? And it's like, what's your job? But, you know, when you're retired, what do you say?
Yeah.
I never liked that, really, when, that was what people wanted to know. Like, where's your income from, or not, it didn't really matter to them if you were a preschool teacher, or did you enjoy your job, that was a basic opening question, I think.
And kind of judgmental too, it's like, you know, they're
Yes.
trying to.
I think so.
No, I mean, you spend more time at your job than anything else. You know, I mean, I think it can be a really good way into where, you know, where a person's at, what they do, where you're, you know. I like asking people. Yeah, well, it doesn't pay anymore because people I know don't work anymore. I always liked asking people, what do you do? I'm interested in people's jobs, you know, it's an interesting topic.
Maybe you could change it to, what do you like to do?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a good idea.
It is
Right.
interesting to hear what people do when they retire.
Yeah. I guess what did you used to do when you were really part of the world? When you were really.
Worse and worse.
For me, when I retired, it's like, how did I do that all those years?
No kidding.
Yeah.
How did I get all that done and now I don't? How did I do all of that?
Right.
I mean, I must have been crazy. I mean, you know, and now you can relax and enjoy it, like you can live in the moment, you know, but.
I think mindfulness enhances what you do or what you're doing. And a good example of that is the authors that we've read, because they, I think to a person, are involved in mindfulness and meditation and deep thinking about these subjects. And they put those into words as authors. And that was inspired, I think, by their particular mindfulness. And I don't know that in my own life, I think my interests haven't changed that much, with probably the exception of being very interested in mindfulness. And I think that's enhanced my life.
I like the mindful listening. I found that very helpful, cause I find so many people I talk to, I can just see that they want me to hurry up and get them talking, cause they wanna get their bit in. You know, and I think, and I just like, well, I don't wanna be like that, you know, so I think I found that very helpful. And just the variety of conversations we've had, everybody here has inspired me or made me think of something I never thought of before, or different way of looking at something. It's really been enjoyable.
I'd heard it before, but I think in the book they said you have 2 ears but only 1 mouth.
That's what Josh said.
That's what I jotted down too, though, to remember that, like when you're on the phone with someone even, you're kind of waiting for them to get done so you can get your next thought in instead of.
And you're not listening.
But not to reflect back on them. It's more like, what did I wanna say yet?
There's kind of an art to just being okay with a little bit of silence and just kind of not having to rush in, you know, and not having to fill every second with talk. I know, Chuck was one time gonna attend something, or we were gonna go to something, he was kind of nervous. And he said, well, you know, I get nervous when I have to talk to these new people, and I said, well, you know, just ask them about themselves and you won't have to say another word. All you have to do is listen.
Well, I do think that the concept is, as long as you're doing the talking, you're not learning anything new, because you're only reciting what you already know.
That's
And
right.
when you look around, how many people, I used to say, if you don't bother to talk and listen to the homeless man under the bridge, you're missing out. You know, you're just missing out.
I used to be a freelance writer, and some of your most interesting stories came from people who thought they didn't do much of anything significant.
Do you write some now for?
No, I quit. I just don't anymore. There isn't time.
Yeah, but you interviewed people and did a lot of that type of stories.
Yeah.
And who did you write stories for, or was it
Uh,
book,
local newspapers.
newspaper? Cool.
I could get stories from people that trained editorial staff couldn't get interviews with. And I think part of it was because I listened.
She has that ability, she can sit down with anybody and they can talk for hours, and I don't have that. I'm one of these, like, well, what do you do? I'm a blunt, and but she has a way of getting people to talk. I wish I had that.
I do write a Christmas letter every year, and I interview my grandkids and my kids and then ask what they would like in the Christmas letter, and it becomes like a document of what's going on in 2024 in their lives. So it's kind of fun, and the kids enjoy it. I send it all to them so they can read it before I send it out.
Some people have a natural talent to listen and to somehow care about other people, but we all have that talent, and we can work on it,
Well, people express it in different ways.
right?
And to ask
True,
the
too.
right question.
Yep.
To pull the good stuff out.
Any other things you wrote down about the past few weeks that you might carry with you? I hope that many of you will keep meditating, and whether you use the reading materials or the stuff that I wrote or anything to enhance your practice, I hope you keep practicing.
I always get this wrong, but is it called giving and taking? Taking and giving,
Oh,
that idea, and I think I found that very valuable, and maybe even for next spring, that might be something to explore a little deeper.
there's that one practice you can look up called Tonglen. You've read about that. That's a Tibetan practice, and it's about, we did that a little bit with that compassion practice. It's about breathing in what other people experience and breathing out with thoughts or stuff like that. That's one of those practices, receiving and giving.
Is that like what they call a meta meditation? META, meta?
I don't know, maybe it is. Yeah.
Where you kind of think of, you start out with someone you don't like,
Oh, yeah,
you know,
that's,
that kind of.
yeah, we usually often call that loving kindness
Yeah.
meditation, metta, right.
Yeah.
And that's intentionally bringing someone to mind and perhaps saying certain phrases that, so if you have certain phrases that are stock phrases for you, it makes it easy. So this is what I do. I visualize, I think of a person and I say, may you be filled with loving kindness. May you be well. May you be peaceful and at ease. May you be happy. And that's one way of doing that metta meditation. Yeah.
I think that's my most important go-to at this point in my practice. And it's always connected to sitting or, some other body scan or something else. I never really can stick with one thing, but I could stick with one thing for a bit of time. But what does Bodhi mean? Bodhisattva, Bodhi, that part of the word.
It means awakened.
Awaken. That's interesting because I don't watch much TV, but there is constant ads for a bed and mattress combination that's called sattva.
Okay.
I found it very interesting listening to other people's thoughts. And, the same question and how varied and sometimes the same. It's just, I don't know, a little window into somebody's, who they are.
And it sometimes I'll open my own mind too, because I didn't think of
Yeah.
what someone else did.
It's so valuable sometimes to be in a group where you can listen to other people and express yourself, open up a little bit about what's going on.
The practice dying, I
Mhm.
think that was really cool. And is that from a book or something?
That
I think it'd be
meditation
more
we did,
practice. Yeah.
yes, I got it off the internet.
Oh.
But it's the same, the author who did the grief book, remind me of his name. Stephen Levine, he wrote that. So it's from another one of his books. I understand.
Our conversation that we had about friendships and about putting the work in, about that, I've been kind of slacking on that, where kind of, cause you're so busy, you wait for kind of people to come to you or just allow things to happen. So it's kind of made me think about how can I instigate or, you know, just send that little message or do something for them and just think outside the box more so than just waiting or allowing something to happen.
I find that concept punctuation helpful, so after you've seen somebody, you send them a note or a text or call them back and say, hey, that was good, or, you know, I was thinking about you. Just remind, you know, that's really helpful.
I never thought of, this is strange, but I'm not sure why, I don't remember why I took this class in the beginning, but when I remember the first night thinking, well, I don't really feel like I'm aging. Unless I look in the mirror, of course, but I'm like, geez, I am in my 60s, maybe I better start thinking about all this stuff. I mean, it's really bizarre, but you know, you're so busy going through the everyday thing. I just retired last year and I'm like, oh, yeah. And so now I'm talking to my husband, we're getting new flooring next spring, and I'm like, maybe we shouldn't put any carpet in. Old people trip over carpet. I mean, now I'm thinking about all this stuff because we plan on staying in this house for, you know, who knows what's gonna happen, but for maybe 10 years yet, and it's just really bizarre. Now I'm kind of like thinking about all this stuff that I never really thought I needed to think about before. I don't know.
It's so different. Of course, in the book, Lewis Richmond interviewed people in their hundreds, and he said, young man, why are you talking about aging? I'm not getting old, you know? There's a whole different attitude, so
Yeah.
that's okay too. I noticed that the AARP newsletter I just got today has a big headline, Super Agers again, so I'm gonna read that. You know, for a long time, I would get stuff from AARP and I said, no, that's not me, but I finally realized that's really worthwhile stuff.
I started with 50, so it's. Maybe one of the most obvious things that I got out of this class is the meditation, the fact that you have to slow down and do this. And you know, when I listen to everybody says I'm so busy, and I wonder, why are we all so busy? I mean, is it our modern day life that keeps us so busy, or what are we all doing? I mean, I say the same thing, I'm busy.
I think most
The
of us,
garbage cans keep getting filled, so.
most of us are baby boomers and we were brought up to be busy.
And we can't stop.
I feel guilty if I'm not accomplishing something.
And it's a Midwest mindset also. You travel to different parts of the United States or different countries and they think we're absolutely nuts that we're, right? You know, you go down south and it's like, whatever, you know.
Or especially maybe other countries.
Yeah.
you know.
Manana. I'll get to it.
Well, our granddaughter was a foreign exchange student in the Czech Republic last year, and she said that they all take vacations and go somewhere because when they were under communist control, they weren't allowed to travel. And so now, whenever they get vacation, they go. And too bad we're not, I know I'm not like that. And they take the whole family.
Did you get a month of paid vacation?
Yeah, my brother lives in Germany, he gets like the whole month off in the summer.
And it's routine.
Yeah, right.
And even like when women have babies, the time they have for maternity leave versus what we have, oh my God, you
Right.
know.
And
They
maternity
did
leave.
a long time, you know.
And a couple months I can do something.
So even from the womb, these babies are pushed into being busy.
About a year ago, I did a study on blue zones in the world. People who live to 100, and the Okinawans are one of them that are way above the world average. And as young people, they form social connections. Like the parents teach the kids to form these social connections that they keep throughout their whole lives. And it's not just about, going out for coffee or lunch, it's about supporting each other, respecting each other. And they form these ties really early and they get it mastered quite early in life. And even if they move away, they still keep these social ties. And they feel the studies that have been done feel that's one of the keys to their successful aging. It's too late at our age to, you can start, but obviously if you can teach your grandchildren or your kids these concepts. And diet and exercise were definitely on the list. And for exercise, most of them just gardened. And that's what they ate as well. So that was enough exercise to stay engaged and limber and everything else. And there was a fourth one, and I can't quite remember what it was, but we have formed a local, so I don't have any children. And at the time, I formed a group with 4 other women that don't have any children because we want to support each other as we age and whatever that might look like. And we now have 12 women that we meet on a regular basis. Some might go off and do this together and that. And we're pretty selective because, it's going to get to the point where it's going to be too big maybe. We don't really want to advertise, but I'm shocked at the amount of couples that don't have children that I've met through this process. There's a lot of them. And, we have concerns of a lot of these women didn't want children, a lot of these couples, and a lot of us did want children and weren't able to. So, but yeah, for the Okinawans, that social ties through lifelong is one of, they say, the studies that have been done is one of the main factors of why they live so long. Because they know somebody cares about them. They have a social support system that's with them through their whole life. So, you can start it at any time. So,
I'm impressed around here, all these high school reunions that keep going on. It's their 70th reunion. Still getting together.
Well, my 55th was in September and I didn't make it, but a friend sent me the picture of the group that was there. And I sent it to my high school English teacher and he says, "Who are all those old people?"
No kidding.
They're all former students of his, but, and I could only recognize a handful of people on there.
I have one last topic that I'd like to close with. And then we'll have time to hang around if you want to talk or share on your own. And this is about gratitude. as I mentioned, I think one thing that came up for me during thinking about the end of life is the amount of appreciation for this life right now. And so instead, what this is also studying about gratitude, I found that we can look at it in different ways. So psychologists love to study all this stuff. So gratitude is an emotion. It's a temporary feeling we get sometimes when we feel satisfied, peaceful, optimistic, things are going well and we feel, oh, this is great, that feeling. And very often we do feel it in our body. So that's really helpful just to notice, oh, I feel kind of calm and soft and maybe warm and kind of open to what's happening. So that's living in the moment. So that's valuable. Another way of looking at it is a mood. So it's not something that happens just in the moment, but kind of goes for a while during the day, and it maybe fluctuates sort of. So, sometimes you just notice, good things are happening in my life. Oh, how wonderful that I'm so lucky to have this now. And this is often something that comes up when we have spent some time with family. And we notice, oh, this feels pretty good, that's why holidays are so important. It's also a trait. So some people just tend to have a grateful disposition. They tend to feel that way. And that's worth cultivating, that you can appreciate under any circumstances that I'm thankful for today, even when nothing exciting happens, just being with what happens. So that's valuable. And lastly, gratitude can be a practice. So this is sort of what I've been talking about all this time, is that we can intend to become a certain person, to live a certain life, and practicing it, just like doing our meditation practice, builds that habit. We can build good habits. So I think mealtime prayers are really valuable. Just sitting down for a moment and saying what you're thankful for right now. Just a few simple words. I think that's really valuable. I've been doing that more now. Or in the book, Richard talks about, not Richard, what's his name? Louis Richmond. He talks about a gratitude walk. And like we did outside, taking a walk and noticing things and just saying, oh, thank you for this beautiful flower. Thank you for the blue sky. Whatever, is really valuable. So it can be a practice. Another thing that I've tried sometimes is a gratitude journal. And just every once in a while writing down what is good, what you're thankful for. So those are some practices.
Would this be a good time to thank you for having this class?
And I thank you all. So I'm going to close with a thank you prayer of sorts that has inspired me. And this is Francis of Assisi wrote this. In 1224, so that's 800 years ago, right? This year. It's called, one title is The Canticle of the Sun. And there's a hymn that they translated and wrote music to it. What's it called again?
Sound,
What?
like a sound or no?
No, I looked it up and now I forgot. I should have written it down. Anyway, this is translation of this Canticle of the Sun that Francis wrote that I think is a good kind of gratitude contemplation. And you notice that I'm not shy about talking about Buddhism and Christianity. Those are the two things that work for me. But I think we're all, it's valuable for all of us. Most High, all-powerful, good Lord, yours are the praises, the glory, the honor, and all blessing. To you alone, Most High, do they belong, and no man is worthy to mention your name. Be praised, my Lord, through all your creatures, especially Sir Brother Sun, who brings the day, and you give light through him, and he is beautiful and radiant in all his splendor. Of you, Most High, he bears the likeness. Praised be you, my Lord, through Sister Moon and the stars. In heaven, you formed them clear and precious and beautiful. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Wind, and through the air, cloudy and serene, and every kind of weather through which you give sustenance to your creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Water, which is very useful and humble and precious and chaste. Praise be you, my Lord, through Brother Fire, through whom you light the night, and he is beautiful and playful and robust and strong. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Mother Earth, who sustains us and governs us, and who produces varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who give pardon for your love and bear infirmity and tribulation. Blessed are those who endure in peace, for by you, Most High, they shall be crowned. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister, bodily death, from whom no living person can escape. Woe to those who die in mortal sin. Blessed are those who will find your most holy will, for the second death shall do them no harm. Praise and bless my Lord, and give him thanks and serve him with great humility. Oh, here it is. The best known version in English is the hymn, All Creatures of Our God and King. So let's close our last class again with sitting meditation, and go up from here. Sitting and breathing. Not trying too hard, but just noticing what comes up. What are we aware of in this moment? Our breathing in and out. feelings in our body. Sensations from the world around us, sounds and sights and thoughts that come through our mind. Perhaps certain emotions come by. Letting them all come and go. Just sitting and being aware. Thanks for your practice.
Thank you.
We'll shut off the recording.
So, I learned something today. Did you know that over 5 women they go into the dimension?
Sure.
Well, good.
So I went, have you read all the books on the list?
No, I'll tell you which ones I've read though.
Because I'm like, I don't know the right time for it, but
I know
There are
last
options.
year, I've read the Aging as a Spiritual Practice.
yeah, I do have that book, I'm only
And I
halfway
like
through it.
that, Falling Upward.
Did you?
Did
you get it up?
Oh,
Didn't do anything for me.
okay, interesting.
I picked
Welcoming the unwelcome, how we live is how we
cluster,
die.
you know,